Imagine the hush that falls over the warm waters between India and Sri Lanka when the sun starts to slide toward the horizon. The air tastes of salt and curiosity, and if you listen closely, you might hear the whisper of an ancient promise. Stones that once floated armies of bears and monkeys racing across the sea, a prince determined to rescue the love of his life. Colored pushpins mark trade routes, migration paths, tectonic boundaries. For them, the bridge is proof enough that love moves worlds. If Prince Rama could rally talking animals and shift mountains to reach Sita, then perhaps any barrier, personal, political, planetary, can be crossed. A young engineer kneels beside her grandmother, both palms pressed together. Later, she confesses to our camera that she studies civil engineering because the legend feels like blueprints written in poetry. A risky love, a leap of faith into a new city or career. Rama's bridge becomes a metaphorical toolkit. You gather helpers, you shape the environment, you turn obstacles into stepping stones. The dance between literal and figurative lightens the script, making sure no viewer feels excluded. Whether you read scripture, geological charts, or social media memes, you still understand what it means to want to cross. One day, she smiles, I'll build a bridge that makes people argue whether it was magic or math. We let the narrator's voice soften, almost whisper, describing how moonlight outlines each shoal as if the past is being underlined by the present. The final minutes loop back to the old fisherman, now mending his nets under a star-spangled sky. Bridges, he muses, aren't always built of stone. Sometimes they're made of stories that people refuse to stop telling. He throws his net once more, and tiny phosphorescent plankton light up, drawing fleeting constellations in the dark water. Brief, luminous bridges that vanish, but linger in memory. We fade out on that shimmer, inviting viewers to ask themselves what invisible causeways they carry inside. The students lean forward as she explains how limestone shoals can rise when sea levels fall, how coral reefs can form chains that look suspiciously like causeways, how myths often bloom in the gaps left by science. Sanskrit chants mingle with Tamil songs, Italian travel vlogs, English documentaries, all lapping over one another like gentle waves. The bridge belongs to everyone and no one. It is a question mark carved in sand, repeatedly erased and redrawn by tides, encouraging every passerby to sketch their own answer before it disappears again. Some stretch the timeline. They say the shoals are 1.7 million years old, and thus perfectly timed with the events in the Ramayana. Others shrink it. They argue the ridges could be products of 15th century storms. The numbers slip and slide, but the conversation itself remains rock solid, a foundation made of curiosity. Yet she pauses, chalk in midair, and admits that data never fully cancels wonder. Between her fingertips drift fragments of dead coral that look like bleached bones. She explains how dredging projects threatened the fragile ecosystem, how protests halted massive shipping plans, how the bridge's mythic aura became a shield for manatees and migratory birds. Sometimes, she says as she surfaces, belief keeps bulldozers at bay. The camera rises with her, water droplets scattering sunlight like shards of glass, reminding us that science and spirituality can share the same wetsuit when survival is on the line. Someone, she tells them, looked at a restless ocean and dared to picture a road. One elder sings of rocks inscribed with Rama's name, tossed into the sea, made buoyant by devotion. The anthropologist records the tune and later runs an experiment. He scrawls the name on pumice and volcanic tuff, both naturally buoyant, proving that what might sound miraculous can hide a geological footnote. Yet he smiles at the discovery rather than debunking it. For him, the magic lies in the human creativity that connects observation to hope. That seed of daring, not the limestone, might be the real foundation of Rama's bridge. That promise has a name, Rama's bridge, or Adam's bridge, or simply the line of shoals that zigzag like a dotted sentence, where the Gulf of Mannar meets the Palk Strait. The story begins in the Sanskrit epic Ramayana, yet it refuses to stay locked in scripture. It keeps stepping out of the page, asking new generations what it means to believe, to question, to build. And right here, at the mouth of our tale, is where we invite our viewers to linger, because this bridge, whether mythic or geological, is less about stones and coral and more about the stubborn human impulse to connect what seems forever apart. We open on a shoreline village at dusk. An old fisherman, net in hand, points toward the faint gray string of sandbars that shimmer like the backbone of a sleeping serpent. "That's where the gods walked," he says with a grin that balances respect and playful skepticism. His granddaughter laughs, recording him on her phone, posting the clip before the breeze can carry the words away. Instantly, the world answers with hearts and comments, some cheering the legend, others linking satellite images, still others debating plate tectonics and sea level change. In the echo chamber of the internet, the bridge becomes a mirror. It shows each of us what we secretly value: faith, evidence, nostalgia, or maybe just the pleasure of a good story well told. Cut to a classroom where a teacher rolls a map across the board. We drift to a temple courtyard where pilgrims break coconuts and tie saffron threads, each gesture a mosaic tile in the larger design of devotion. Here, language itself becomes a ferry. Halfway through our first arc, we introduce a marine biologist who dives beneath the surface. Our narrative shifts inland to a botanist tracing mangrove roots, then to an anthropologist collecting folk songs that mention floating stones. From time to time, we pause the footage and address the audience directly, asking them to recall moments when they dared to believe in something bigger than proof, perhaps an ambitious project. The chapter unfurls like dusk turning into night. We show satellite images, a slender white ribbon on deep blue. We overlay verses from Valmiki alongside GPS coordinates. Morning breaks, and with it a surge of modern noise: ferry horns, drone cameras, push notification pings. The second sweep of our journey begins not on ancient shores, but in government offices and virtual forums where the fate of Rama's bridge is debated in real time. Politicians argue shipping lanes, economists discuss trade shortcuts, environmentalists warn of habitat disruption, while spiritual leaders insist the bridge is sacred ground. Our lens captures dancers swirling, peacock feathers flashing, conch shells sounding. Here, the bridge symbolizes not just passage but reconciliation between ethnic groups, between island and mainland, between yesterday's wounds and tomorrow's possibilities. She cracks jokes about getting lost between myth and math, then challenges her followers to share stories of personal bridges crossed: cultural, emotional, intellectual. A voiceover reflects on how the very fragility of the structure gives it power. Because the bridge is always at risk of erosion, of industrial dredging, of political compromise, it forces us to ask what we really value. Is it commerce over time saved? Is it biodiversity protected? He speaks into the wind about the concept of liminality, spaces that are neither here nor there, moments that sit on thresholds. Dawn. The voiceover grows intimate, almost conspiratorial, reminding viewers that every time they refresh a feed, cross a street, forgive a friend, they are building or maintaining a bridge. She edits her new montage, clips of scientists, activists, monks, business people, dreamers, and overlays her own soft narration. Remember, the ocean never asked whether the bridge was myth or fact. May the next bridge you set out to build, whether across water, across cultures, or across the quiet distance between your hopes and your fears, carry you somewhere surprising and kind. Until we meet again, keep listening for tides that speak, keep believing in stones that float, and keep walking toward horizons where legend and life shake hands. It just kept weaving currents around it, inviting life. We can do the same. We can let stories and data swirl together until they sculpt something sturdier than either could alone. She clicks upload, and as pixels race across fiber optic cables from continent to continent, we realize that this act itself is a bridge, carried on light that bends through glass beneath entire oceans. The epic of Ramayana might be ancient, but its core instruction, trust effort, nurture collaboration, move toward compassion, remains modern. We challenge the audience to choose a barrier in their own lives and place the first symbolic stone tonight, even if that stone is simply a text message sent, an apology offered, a conversation attempted. And dusk, childhood and adulthood, laughter that catches in the throat before turning to tears. Rama's bridge, he suggests, is a perpetual liminal space. It invites us to stay on the threshold long enough to notice how identity can be fluid, how certainty can soften into curiosity, how edges often host the richest variety of life. He scoops a handful of wet sand, lets it drain between his fingers, and notes how each grain carries bits of both India and Sri Lanka, refusing to declare allegiance to either shore. Is it intangible heritage preserved for grandchildren we might never meet? Every tide that slips through the gaps is like an hourglass, counting down until we decide. Within minutes, the comment feed overflows. One viewer learning a new language to marry into another culture, another forgiving an estranged parent, someone else leaving a stable job to pursue sustainable farming. The influencer shouts out random usernames, turning strangers into nodes of an ever-expanding web. Somewhere, the algorithm smiles. Data scientists call it engagement, but perhaps it's just humanity practicing the craft of connection. A Sinhalese monk and a Tamil priest walk side by side, discussing joint projects to reforest mangroves. Their collaboration reminds us that the structure we call Rama's bridge exists in diplomatic space as well. It offers a narrative both countries can share without erasing their differences. The music rises, and the narrator points out that bridges are not only about shortest paths, but about shared responsibilities. If the shoals vanish, so do rare seahorses, so do centuries-old pilgrimage routes, so does a story that teaches cooperation among species. Remember the squirrels in the Ramayana, tiny bodies dusted with sand, honored forever by the stripes on their backs. The screen splits into video call grids, each square a different stake in the same sandy trench. Monsoon clouds roll in, and we follow a meteorologist explaining how shifting weather patterns might actually pile more sediment onto the chain, thickening it in some places while carving channels in others. Nature, it seems, is still writing rough drafts of the bridge, and humans are merely editors arguing over punctuation marks. The meteorologist smiles when asked if she believes in the legend. Belief, she says, isn't binary. I believe the ocean tells stories, and this is one of them. The tension is palpable yet strangely hopeful. After all, a bridge, even a contested one, forces dialogue. We drop into a bustling cafe in Chennai, where a group of college students explore open-source satellite data on their laptops. They zoom, measure, annotate. One student proposes establishing an augmented reality heritage trail that would let tourists visualize the mythic army carrying boulders, overlaying animation onto the seascape through their phones. Another counters with a conservation app that alerts users whenever illegal sand mining threatens the shoals. The buzz of ideas becomes its own bridge, linking tradition to technology, reverence to research. Across the strait in Sri Lanka, a coastal community prepares for the annual Kataragama pilgrimage. We shift to a laboratory where paleoclimatologists extract sediment cores from the seabed. They read the layers like chapters: monsoon cycles, tsunamis, volcanic winters. Each stratum holds clues about future sea level rise, and therefore about the bridge's survival. One scientist confesses she keeps a photograph of the shoals on her desk because it anchors her purpose. Our projections aren't just numbers, she says. They decide which legends remain walkable. The line hits hard. We realize that climate change may choose whether faith journeys become boat rides or still dare foot traffic. Suddenly, we cut to a social media influencer live streaming from a paddleboard directly over a sandbar. Back in our narrative workshop, we interlace expert interviews with slow-motion shots of waves sliding through porous limestone arches. We pivot into a heartfelt montage, archival footage of the 2004 tsunami, relief boats weaving through debris, activists forming human chains along beaches to protest canal projects, children planting saplings in salty soil. A crack of thunder cues our next beat. As we near the final curve, we invite a philosopher to walk barefoot along the wet sand. The camera lifts high for our last aerial sweep, tracing the shoals as sunset paints the water in molten colors. Our concluding scene returns to the granddaughter who filmed her grandfather at the start. Thank you for sharing this journey with us.